Have you noticed all the cool stuff people are doing with Crackle in polymer clay? It's really a fun technique that looks interesting in so many different ways, and today I'm going to show you a simple way of doing a fine crackle with polymer clay. Hi there, Sandy here. Welcome to another polymer clay video at keepsakecrafts.net. So here are a few examples of crackled polymer clay. This is green polymer clay on black polymer clay, and as you can see here you get different looks. Now this is a fine crackle. I'm going to do a little bit more exploring and see if I can decode that chunky crackle that is so popular these days. Although it seems like a simple concept, there are a few things about it that you need to know in order to be successful. So the way I did these crackles was I have some polymer clay here that is just barely baked. It's a very thin sheet. In fact, if I do this, you could see it starting to split. That's what you want. If you bake polymer clay plenty of time, according to the manufacturer's directions, and even a little bit longer, a sheet like this would be strong and flexible and it wouldn't crack and split. But for our purposes today, we don't want that. And you can use, of course, any colors you want, but a high contrast is nice. And the reason the crackles happen is that when we roll this onto the fresh clay, of course, the baked clay doesn't stretch the way the fresh clay does. The baked clay cracks. And if we roll it in one direction and then the other, then we end up with cracks that go in both directions. This one's a little bit different, and I'll tell you about this in a moment. Now, you know all those times that I've told you to make sure to condition your clay well so that it's strong? In this case, you don't really have to mix it thoroughly or condition it well, because it's okay if it's brittle. And I'm just going to cut a little bit of this and run it through my pasta machine on the thinnest setting I have, which on my Atlas is a 9. So this is the thinnest setting. Oh, that's pretty. That's going to be pretty crackled. This is the thinnest setting, but it isn't thin enough, I found. I'm just going to cut a piece. And I'm going to put it in the middle of a tile. This is just a 4-inch ceramic tile from Home Depot. I've got stacks of these. I've got 4-inch, 6-inch, other sizes. They're fantastic. Take your roller. You want to roll your clay onto the tile and thin it out even further. So I'm going to roll this in all directions. And I'm going to keep rolling until basically I have just a smear of clay on the tile. When it starts coming off on your roller like that, then you know you're getting, and it starts tearing and ripping, then you know you have it close to thin enough. Now what you need is one of these. This is a heat gun. We've used it for other techniques in polymer clay. You'll often find these in the scrapbooking section, used for heat embossing on paper crafts. Now what we're going to do, let's see if I can tilt this so you can see it. There we go. The clay is shiny when it's raw. We're going to heat it with the heat gun just until it all turns matte, which on a piece this size will only take about 15 seconds. There it goes. Can you see that? I hope the camera is picking that up. So it's just going from shiny and suddenly it's dull. You don't want to over bake it because, like I said, polymer clay, if baked long enough, is actually very strong and flexible. And in this case, we don't want strong and flexible clay. We want it kind of brittle. Now you need a blade to slide this very, very thin piece of clay up off the tile. Flip it over and repeat on the other side. And that's it. I'm just going to let that cool off a little. I mentioned this piece here was done a little bit differently. You can see it's much more smeary and less crackly. This was a thick piece of clay. It was rolled out on the thickest setting of my pasta machine. And I did the exact same thing with this tool that I heated both sides for about 15 seconds until they turned dull and no longer shiny. But of course, since it was such a thick piece of clay, the clay on the inside was not baked. So what happened when I ran it through was the inside was still raw and it did these smears, and then the outside part crackled, which was an interesting different look. I had this on a piece of Glad press and seal, by the way, which I found is awesome for handling sheets of clay. I've done a video on that I'll link to. Done in the right colors, this would almost look like a landscape. If I had some, the greens here and then maybe some blue and white streaks or colors of a sunset, it would actually be quite beautiful. So when you're practicing, I suggest you just cut smallish pieces of your clay to practice with. So I'm going to put the clay that I'm going to crackle down here at the end because as it rolls through the pasta machine, it's going to travel up. Now you can do some experimenting with this yourself, but the type of crackles you get, how fine or how chunky they are, depends on the difference between the thickness of what you're rolling through the machine and the setting you have it at. So this is a number 1 plus a very, very thin. So if I roll it through on a number 1, I can show you, not much is going to happen. Like nothing. Nothing happened. What you want to have is a dramatic difference between what you're rolling through. So I've just set this on a number 6, and let's see what happens here. But don't roll it through on the very thinnest on the first pass, unless you only want crackles in one direction. Oh, here we go. Ooh, now that's cool. Actually, that is kind of cool all by itself. It almost looks like tiger stripes. Ooh, I like that. Now we've got all this extra clay up here, and what I'm going to do is just fold it down so that we have a double thickness that we can roll through on the other direction. Because if you roll that through, again, the way to get the more spacing in your crackles is to have a big difference between what you're rolling through and what you have the setting on. I'm just going to move this down to a 7, and then we'll see. And I'm turning it 90 degrees to the way I rolled it through before. Sorry, here we go. Counter's in the way of my handle. Ooh, isn't that pretty? I'm in love, I think. Wow. And you can see you could use this for so many different things. Just cut a section of it and use it as part of a veneer. Use it for a background. Just roll this around some scrap clay to make beads. There's all sorts of uses for it. And in next week's video, I will be showing you a project using the Crackle. Now, another thing you can do is add some mica powders or other pigments, because this orange and yellow clay is baked. The pigments aren't going to stick to it, but they will stick to the unbaked black clay. And so it kind of fills in there. But here's an example of the green with some, I think it was gold or copper or bronze, something put in there. I put it on and then I wiped off the excess with a baby wipe, so it just stayed on the black, and it really is a beautiful look. So here's a fun jumping off point for you for making your own crackled polymer clay. I promise I will continue to experiment, finding ways of doing chunky crackles and other interesting things. And like I said, check back next week and we'll be using some of these crackled clays in a really great project. If you're interested in the supplies I used, you should click on the link in the upper right of the video or in the description box to go to my blog post, where I'll always have a complete supply list with product links. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And if you love these videos and you've benefited from them and learned from them, consider supporting them by becoming a patron. You get great rewards and chances to win some of my creations. Happy creating. Bye-bye.